Hi everyone, today is a very special day, and today we will be presenting our first interview of the MTI series. The interview has been conducted by Amelia, who is a student intern at MTI, and the interviewer is none other than Director of MTI, Father Brian. I hope you like it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining me, Father Brian. We're just here today to talk a little bit about your experience with Mother Teresa and the Mother Teresa Institute. So if you would like to start by just introducing yourself, telling us who you are, and how you're involved with Mother Teresa's work.
Okay, so I'm Father Brian Kolodechuk, Missionaries of Charity, originally from Winnipeg, Canada, and I met Mother Teresa and Missionaries of Charity originally because of my sister joined before I did, and so she joined in New York way back in 1976, and then she was in New York, London, and then in Rome. And in May 77, she was going to enter the novitiate. So my parents and I traveled to Rome to see her the first time. We're seeing her as a sister. And at that time, Mother Teresa was there because she was beginning a group of contemplative brothers. And so she knew that I was a brother of one of her sisters because they were asking me to do the first reading, and and then we'd be there for holy hour and things. So she knew I was the brother. And so at the opening of the brothers, there was a German priest and 5 Italian laymen. And so part of the ceremony to begin the brothers was she pinned a cross, like the sisters have a cross up here, which actually holds the sari together. And but for us, the men is just decoration more. And so she pinned the cross on these 6 people. And then after the mass, and then it was time to go. And so my parents said goodbye to Mother, and then it was my turn. And then she said to me, "I would like to pin a cross on you too." So I was only like 21, so I was like, "Whoa." So I was much more shy in those days, and so I didn't say anything. I just kind of went out the door. Only the next morning after mass, I had some courage and went up and asked her, so like, what did you mean? And as I learned later with Mother Teresa, if you can do it today, we're doing it today. So she said, stay in Rome and join the brothers. And I said, well, I can't because I have to go back to Canada for operation. But I did come back in September. And then I even have a picture for the following year, April the 9th, 78. I have a picture of Mother pinning a cross on me. She came to Rome. So that's how I started.
That's incredible. That's an incredible moment of recognition.
Yeah, that little encounter changed my whole life because we wouldn't be having this conversation unless God can find another way, but that was the way he chose. So, and then I was with the brothers for a while, and then I left because I still want to be a priest. And then so we started the Fathers in 1983 in the Bronx, New York, and then after we switched to Tijuana. So that's kind of briefly the MC Father part.
The rundown. And what would you say stands out to you as sort of the biggest ways that your experience with Mother, because you knew her quite personally, the way that she impacted your life and sort of affected your philosophy? Like, is there anything big that stands out to you on that side?
Okay. Well, one of the things that she was very simple and ordinary. Sometimes I like to say, if you didn't know what she looked like, and you went to the chapel in the convent of the sisters, you may notice her because of the way she did those little things, like taking holy water at the beginning, make the sign of the cross, a genuflection, those little things. You say, oh, well, there's something special about that nun. The way she does it. But so doing those little things, and one of the sisters, when her last visit to Rome in 1997, in the year she died, just several months before, one of the sisters by then she needed help to get dressed, and she was on the wheelchair. And but one of the sisters told me how edified she was by the way that, early in the morning, they have the sari and they have 2 pins up here to keep the sari in place. And so she was so edified how lovingly she did it, because they have these little prayers that they say as they vest. And how many thousands of times she did it. Someone less might just do it out of habit. Okay, get dressed and put the pins and get to the chapel. But those little fidelity to those small things. So I like to say, she was the first one to keep the rule and the first one to know when to break the rule. And like for example, when I was with the brothers, and I have done first year theology, then the question was, what am I going to do? And so she said, well, okay, let him do the second year in the bishop first, and after the second year, you can do the first year, and in that way, I can keep studying in the second year. So that's what happened. So, she knew how to be flexible because it came from the interior, not just because she's lazy or whatever, but if well, there's one line in the Lumen Gentium, a Vatican II document, that says, charity governs, gives meaning to, and perfects all the other means of holiness. And so that's one reason why she's a saint, because she was able to make those choices. And as I say, keep the rule and break the rule.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, kind of similar to that, is there anything that you found in your experience that you think might surprise people about Mother Teresa? Like I've heard she had a great sense of humor, like things like that.
She wasn't great at telling jokes, but she could laugh at the funny things. And sometimes sisters are at recreation in the evening before night prayer, and they might recount some of the funny happenings of the day. And so she really, and a couple of times there's the reports she even like bent over laughing. So she knew really, she had a great sense of humor. So he wasn't overly serious, like your unfortunately stereotypical nun.
Right.
She wasn't that.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. And then what was that like? So you served as an advocate for her canonization. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like, especially knowing her so personally as well as sort of professionally?
Yeah. So, that was one of the challenges, because you're the postulator. So you postulate, you put forward the case. And but at the same time, and we're told that when we start, that you have to be as objective as we can. And even I had to find 8 negative witnesses, or at least had something negative to say. And and then the, more than half of the witnesses had to be non-sisters. You could say, 50 sisters, you all witness, and then, they think she's great, and there she is, kind of nice. No. So, and so it's a process that's aimed at getting, I mean, no other church dares to go through someone's life with such a fine-tooth comb. Okay, so there's everything. And that's even why there's the miracle. Okay, so, we do all the process. They say, okay, well, we couldn't find anything. We looked for all the negative. So we come to a more morally certain judgment that she is worthy of canonization. However, there's not an absolute moral judgment. So the miracle is the confirmation of the church's judgment or discernment of what is among the people of God, because the cause begins like bottom up. First, it has to be a sense among the people, and then there's the formal process, and then the miracle is God's confirmation. So that's how that works.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear about that from that
Yeah,
perspective.
no, it was when at the very beginning, when the class started in Calcutta, I was very surprised by the attention of all the media, and they wanted to know the process itself. And of course, everyone has an interest in miracles, so they wanted to know all about the miracles. It still interests people.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And then after that experience, at what point did you feel called to start the Mother Teresa Center and Institute?
Okay, so after the beatification, so the postulation has 2 main tasks: the actual formal process, and to, in quote marks, promote your candidate. Okay, so we didn't have to do that for Mother Teresa. She was one of the rare cases where she already had worldwide, you have to look for solid and widespread reputation of holiness and intercessory power. Okay, so that's why she was the first exception to wait to the rule of waiting 5 years to make sure that there is a solid reputation of holiness and intercessory power. So the John Paul II made her first exception. So, and then everyone wanted to do it wanted us to work fast, so we didn't have to do the promotion part, and we were really focused fully on the process part. And so, she was the fastest beatification until John Paul beat her by a few months, a little bit after. Okay, so, but there was nothing, it was fast, but the process itself was respected. There was only two exceptions. One was not waiting for 5 years, and the second exception was that they because normally you're supposed to consider life, make a declaration, becomes venerable, and then they investigate the miracle. But for each one, there's a decree and a little ceremony back in those days, and so they in this case they first made the judgment on the life, and then they didn't wait for the formal decree. So then after they did that, they considered the miracle, so that the life and miracle decrees were on the same rite or same ceremony some months later. So those were the only two. And as a matter of fact, we had 113 oral witnesses, which is typical causes has around 50, maybe average. So we did more than the minimum. Well, maybe you're young enough, another 50 years, you might see some of this, because they have to wait 50, 75 years, but eventually people will be able to read everything.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting to hear
Yeah,
that
like
internal.
Saint Therese, you can read everything, for example. Yeah.
And so having that sort of understanding of her life in that way lead you to your later interest in
Yeah,
Saint?
okay, so then, yeah, so we did that, and so after the beatification, we figured, I proposed to, okay, the four superior generals of the branches, the sisters, brothers, contemporary brothers and fathers. Okay, so, and together they formed, thinking already post-canonization, because she's canonized, the postulation kind of doesn't work anymore. I mean, it works in the sense that you can do publications and relics and things, but you don't go around saying, we're the postulation of Mother Teresa, because, well, she's a saint already. Okay, so in view of that, in 2004, then I proposed to them this beginning of the Mother Teresa Center. So I did a little investigation and see what they did for other holy people and saints. So and then back then in 2004, I had already proposed the Mother Teresa Institute, but we didn't even start doing anything until 2017, so about years later. Okay, so, but the intuit and the sense of it is that I like to say, if 800 years later they're still talking and writing about Saint Francis of Assisi, the simple saint of Assisi, and another example, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, another simple, in quote mark, simple saint, although she's now a doctor of the church. But so I think, well, I think Mother also will be worthy of study, and which kind of was confirmed. Okay, until the book "Come Be My Life" came out, which was her whole interior life and the trial of the darkness and everything. People thought, well, okay, she was a nice, holy woman, did the service for the poor, like Vincent de Paul, and that's nice. Okay, but then you discover, I mean, some, real experts talk of her as a real mystic, or even a mystical martyrdom. Okay, so as a young teenager in Skopje, where she was born, her Jesuit parish priest, and they were already talking about their desire for martyrdom. So we discovered from these data, and doing this investigation, because we didn't, when she was alive, she didn't want to talk about herself, nothing. Okay, and she would tell her brother, "Don't say anything about the family." Okay, so she wanted no attention on her. And I know I was just reading recently, she asked Eileen Egan, not in a biography, don't write about her. And she said, I know it's going to ruin the book, but please don't write about me. And okay, so thankfully the Jesuits and others saved the material. But she was so focused, and even when then there was an Indian bishop who wanted to begin another congregation. So he asked the Archbishop of Calcutta, Perrier, for information and documents about the beginning of the missions of charity. And when Mother heard of it, she went first to the office. He wasn't there, thankfully. So she came back and wrote a letter. Please don't share anything of the beginning, because once they find out about it, they're going to be putting attention on me and not on Jesus. Okay. So she was super, we say Christocentric, but as the years went by, became more personal. She would often mostly speak of Jesus. So I say she's like Jesus-centric. And so she's so focused, she didn't, and imagine, you're one of the most famous, most admired women of the 20th century in the polls, and these, and then when they invite her to speak, and of course there's an introduction. And today we have Mother Teresa. She did Nobel Peace Prize, and I mean, pride is very subtle, so that can easily get to your head. And but she said, what she told us, God gave me the grace that what I hear, all the praise and all that stuff, goes in one ear and out the other. Okay, so, and she would say, I'm really humble. She said, no, God gave me the grace to what I hear. So, and I think the darkness was one thing that helped her, because when in 1962 she went to the Philippines to get her first major award. And she came back and said, "Oh, there was commotion and people and all this stuff, but it didn't bother me because I want him." She was focused on, and so all the outside, attention and everything didn't touch her. So, and so that's I think faith and humility are besides charity, are her two biggest virtues. So, yeah. No, I was going to say, yeah. So that the purpose of, because I do think, and I think the reaction to Come Be My Light just confirms that most amazing thing, she was one of the most public persons of the 20th century, celebrity besides a saint, and yet she managed to keep her interior life so private. And I say, thankfully, the Jesuits kept the material, because, well, I mean, that's a very important part of her own holiness, and even part of her, the spirituality and mission. Missions of charity aren't going to have 50 years of darkness, most likely, but still, it's and once she finally understood it with the help of Father Neuner, and she wrote just a few months later, a general letter that now we understand even more, because we have to share in the destitution, the interior suffering of people. We have to have our share in it, and that's what she finally learned from her own experience, but she didn't say anything.
Yeah.
So the sisters, even the closest sisters, had no idea of what she had been gone through. And so she chose to smile, and she chose to be joyful.
Mm.
And so.
And do you think from that sort of her, I don't know if struggles with faith is the right word, but that period of darkness that you're describing, do you think that is something, we're kind of looking at MTI from a research perspective, is that something that we can learn from her life, sort of as outsiders, and should we be learning from that?
Yes. Okay. It was shortly after the book came out, one priest in the United States wrote to me and said, he had already left the priesthood, and he read the book and he came back. And so, yeah, so I said, if you read some of her letters, even for one soul. So I'm sure that she would be happy, even for that one priest she saved, she would have been very, very happy. And so another bishop told me that there was one man who was dying, and he had real difficulty in accepting that he was sick and dying, and so those letters really helped him to accept and die peacefully. So. Yeah, the Origin, one of the early almost church fathers, had an expression, anima ecclesiastica. It's like literally a soul of the church. So it was so given that even every part of their life is public and given for the church. So I think Mother is one of those, not in her lifetime, thankfully. She would have killed me if I ever I said, well, I hope I did right because otherwise I'm in big trouble.
Yeah.
And no, but I'm sure.
Well,
Now
what do
her
you think?
perspective is different from heaven.
Yeah. If what do you think she would say about MTI if she could, obviously, what
Oh
will she say
yeah,
to you?
yeah. No, I think yeah, she understood that her life was for other, and she knew she had a role to play, and she knew she was Mother Teresa, okay, and because I mean, how could you not know she was? She's very simple, but she wasn't stupid, And one time they were in the car, and there's some sign of, some sign that had her figure announcing something, and then she said to her companion, "Oh, there she is." So she knew. I mean, she had influence. She'd speak to the presidents and prime ministers and queens and kings, and so she knew she was Mother Teresa. But it wasn't like it was for the sake of everything was focused on the work for the poor. So she would do anything, go anywhere, and speak with anyone for their sake. So she was really, and for her, that was Jesus. She was, Jesus. Matthew 25:40, whatever you did to the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. That's one of the key phrases of understanding. I thirst, and you did it to me are about the two keys to understanding the whole life and work. So once you start, that's what I say, once you start digging, there's all kinds of topics for research. You know, her life, spirituality, mission, influence in church history, spirituality, Math 2540. I think if there's anything she's going to teach to the church, it's 2540. So, I mean, even next year, 2026, I'm hoping that's going to be the topic for the academic day. And so different, perspective of scripture and historical, because and unfortunately, the New American Bible translates Matthew 25:40 as you did it for me, and it was very different than saying to me.
Mm.
So there's lots of topics to do once you start.
Yeah, so that's kind of a
So
good way to talk about MTI's mission as a whole, and sort of
yeah,
how you see that going, as
yeah,
why should people be interested in researching Mother Teresa and what should they hope to
yeah.
find?
It's very interesting. The fellow that we have, the fellow is Joseph Evans, and so he's been making contact with different universities, Villanova, where he was, and sometimes teaches, Marquette and a couple other ones. And at first, they if you just said, okay, we're going to do research on Mother Teresa, they might say, but then once you hear about it, then you say, oh yeah, I guess yeah, that makes sense. So it's not like it comes naturally to everybody, but once you say something, and then show that there's something, so that's part of what we do every September, and maybe with time we can even do other things, other places, and that's part of Joseph's organizing. But so she's one of those that you have to kind of indicate, show to people that there is something there to study, just like for Saint Therese at first, so. So yeah, we're just at the beginning. We're just laying the foundation. So where we'll be in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years when I'm not here any longer. So we have the building there for 60 years. So I won't be around to be deciding what happens next.
I'm sure a lot of big things. And I think you talked at the beginning about the trying to keep her legacy alive for hundreds of years to come. Do you think MTI itself is going to be enough to keep this conversation going? Are you worried about the legacy of Mother Teresa in the future? How are you working to safeguard
Yeah,
that memory?
yeah. I think, one of the key words from the beginning, even for the Mother Teresa Center, because we started by, the center focuses on Mother Teresa's writings as such, and the Institute will do all the other kind of publications about Mother, let's say. That's how we kind of divided it up. And, so, from the beginning, the key word for the center was authenticity. So we're concerned about the words because, you look on the internet, there's several things that famous one, life is da, 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 do it, that and that's most people. If you look at the internet, that's supposed to be Mother Teresa, but it's not. And so there's a few other ones that are, and so some of the quotes you have to be careful. Sometimes they're translations from another language that was originally from English. And so one of the things that they do here in Tijuana is the permissions. So people want to use a sentence or a couple sentences. And so we give the permission, plus we verify that it's authentic, because sometimes you have to say, well, that kind of sounds like Mother, but so that's one of the key things that we do already. A seemingly small thing, but we just did the general letters, so it's a big book, and so these are all, and so people are enjoying that one because you get to really see, they started in 1960 because the sisters were all in Calcutta until 1959. And so there's no letters from the 50s. But once they started going out of Calcutta, then she would be writing these, in religious life, the Spirit General writes these common letters. And so we have from 60 until 97 when she died, those letters. And that's a treasure trove too. Like for example, terminology. Okay, at the beginning, in the dialogue with Jesus at the beginning, the phrase "a victim of love" comes up often. Okay, so once in a while she'll use it here and there, but okay, will be interesting research topic. Okay, terminology. Okay, that was Saint Therese used that word. She did. Then after she wasn't using it, so or in the 70s, then she started speaking about the bread of life. Why? Because that was a common, phrase. The Eucharistic Congress in Philadelphia in 76 was some, about that. So these kind, what influences, and she was, hearing homilies all the time. So, and then, and her spiritual reading. And we have in Tijuana here, and in Washington, we'll have the books that we know she was reading, and so there's lots of topics once you start.
Yeah, it's an incredible archive of material that you have about her, and that kind of being able to chart those changes over her life through different periods, different, environments, phases of her sort of fame, I guess, is also
Right.
really valuable. And I think that also sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, also influence within the church. I think when I say it, most people agree. There's not a church figure that has had such an outside influence or echo outside of the church since Saint Francis of Assisi. Okay. There's other great saints, John of the Cross, and a few others, Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, and these other ones, but there's such a echo outside. Unfortunately, a lot of people won't go to Calcutta either because Calcutta is Calcutta. So, but so we have to bring Mother. That's another reason, we have to bring Mother Teresa to these other places. So like we've done, the exhibition that we prepared for the beatification and the canonization is like 82 panels. And so even we did it for the United Nations, some United Nations organization, even in India, so some years back. So and then World Youth Days, we've had the exhibition. So a lot of it's also for the young people to keep contact. We're always present at World Youth Days. And it's very interesting to watch the youth look at the sisters. The sisters are there with their backpacks and they're participating, and the youth go, "Can I take a picture with you?" And they love me, just having a picture. It's very interesting. And they go they sleep at night. The World Youth Day Saturday night is the vigil, and they just sleep, and they have the Sunday morning mass. And so the sisters are there camping out, and so they're right there with the young people. So the young people appreciate those things.
Yeah, that kind of the aspect of bringing Mother Teresa into the world, I think, is really, really valuable. And that kind of makes me wonder about, how Mother Teresa's message is going to change, become more relevant, remain relevant in like the world today. So I would think, in sort of what's often described to be, an increasingly secular world or increasing religious conflict. Like in the past few days alone, since the passing of Pope Francis, we've seen a lot of discourse about divisions within the church, conflicts. And I think Mother Teresa's work is often seen as transcending those religious boundaries in the work that she lived in her everyday life. So do you think
That's
that
true.
has an
That's
important
true.
part of that
Yeah,
aspect?
because even like when she spoke publicly, she wouldn't be, critical and condemning and criticizing this. The message was positive. Okay, God has chosen us, and He still wants to show His love and His compassion, His presence through you and me, and so that's why even now in Calcutta and other places, but in Calcutta especially, there's always volunteers. And they come to Calcutta and they serve in the Home for the Dying and the Shishubava and the Children's Home. And I like to say they're from all over the spiritual map. Some might be fervent Catholics, some are not Catholics, some are atheists, some are searching, some are Protestants and Muslims and all kind of people. But so, when you're focused outside of yourself and when you're helping, then the fruit comes. And so you're not being, when you're not being selfish, that kind of if you're trying to be happy in a selfish way, it never works. But if you're focused outward, God and neighbor, then the fruit of that is your own happiness. So wherever they are in the spiritual journey or faith journey, from 0 to 100, and they always get something because they're serving. And so it's very impressive to see that. The volunteers in Calcutta as one particular place, but in other places too. And so, like even in Washington, they come from the seminary, they come from Catholic University, and every September they have Volunteers Day at Catholic University of America. It's called Mother Teresa Service Day. And when I went, the first year I was there in Washington, they asked me to say something, and there was like 700 students. I said, wow, 700. Oh, say, yeah, well, before COVID, there was like 1,000. I said, oh, okay. And so they go all over even some of them some of their service was to pick up the garbage around campus. That was their service. And it's okay. So, yeah, I think she's, in that sense, she's, because in India, most of the helpers and volunteers were Hindus because they're 80% Hindu. And there was one lady, her husband did kind of help Mother with practical, in quote mark, business stuff. And his wife was at the Home for the Dying almost every day for 25 years. She's Hindu. So, I think also she had that effect in India, of more attention to the poor, taking care of the poor, and not just kind of leaving them on the street. So now in Calcutta, you don't see that many people on the street anymore. There's some are, but not like before. So, yeah.
That's incredible. It really speaks to the power of the movement that she did, and thinking about that number of volunteers is really, really impressive. How does the MTI kind of interact with the other mother-related institutions, so the Missionaries of Charity and other charities that are doing similar work? How do you differentiate but also keep the same mission alive?
Yeah, well, our focus is Mother Teresa, so the if someone wants to, if someone wants to come and learn about her, and and because they do, people who are inspired by Mother Teresa do more than just go and look for the sisters. If the sisters are around, then like in Washington, the different groups, they have too many volunteers. They have to, some of us, sorry, we don't have enough. But they can find other places. There's all kinds of, the poor are always going to be around. So until the end of time, sad to say, but that's this world. So there'll always be something to do. And then, I saw Mother once, she sent a woman home because she had come to help the sisters. This was in Rome. And Mother thought she was there too much, and she knew something of her family. So she said, no, you go home. Your first duty is at home on your family. And then so the co-workers of Mother Teresa was a big organization. And So she would say you can be a co-worker right in your house. And, you know, something like St. Therese, you know, she kind of bore the idea, you know, small things, great love. Ordinary things, extraordinary love. So you can be doing well, your daily activity at home, at work, if you're a student, and you know, so it's not the action itself that has the value, well, big or small. I mean, it has value, but the point that you it gets value from the love with which we do things, because most of our actions during the day are morally neutral, okay, neither bad in themselves nor good, so that they have value, or say supernatural value, with the by the love with which we do them. So, and that's for anybody anywhere. You know, smallest things, picking a piece of paper from the floor and putting it in the garbage can. Love has value. So, and yeah, and that's what she did. I mean, in the convent, she would be, you know, there and visiting, and she'd help washing the dishes, and you know, the sister wouldn't allow her to do her own laundry, but they would wash her sari for her, but because she was always so busy, you know. But no, as much as she could, and that's why every Sunday, you know, to keep that contact, she would go for the Home for the Dying in Calcutta, Kaligat, and she'd wash the toilets. It's just to keep, you know, always a thing setting an example, but just to keep her feet on the ground and do those small, ordinary things a lot of people wouldn't even want to do. So,
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the appeal, seeing her do these things with her own hands and
yeah,
reflect that. Um, do you think so? How would you think about the importance of MTI kind of as a research institute in terms of uh, why it deserves to have a place alongside, you know, the charitable aspects like the missionaries of charity? Like, how would you respond to someone who asks, you know, shouldn't we be focusing these efforts on following Mother Teresa's mission and serving the poor rather than the research side? How would you answer that?
yeah, it's not an either or.
Mm.
You know, one of my favorite expressions I got from a book called Built to Last, and it was about great companies. And one of the principles was it's not the tyranny of the or, but the genius of the and. Okay, so a good company or a great company, you know, it's seemingly, you know, especially if they seemingly, it's like a paradox, seemingly contrary somehow, but no, so it's not one or the other. And I think it's like even the work of the fathers, one of the reasons we began was, and Mother was concerned about, you know, to keep the right spirit, you know, the charism, the spirituality, keep it on track. And that, you know, to do that, you need to study and you need to know things. And so part of it is the research is for the sake of ultimately the work and the sisters' work and anybody else. Okay, so it's not purely academic in that sense, but it's with a focus in uh, you know, if we keep things authentic and so people learn about it and see, because you know we do have one of the things we hope to do in the future is like to have a program. You do a retreat, partly study, and then service, and then you come back and reflect on it. You know, experience is an experience, but you don't learn from it until you, as to use the word today, process the experience. And and so that was one of the things hopefully we can also set up. So it's a real all around experience, you know. And so we'll see. But yeah, the hope it's not in that sense just purely academic or research for the sake of it, but it has that practical ultimate goal of helping the mission to work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like it'll continue to develop a lot in the coming years. What are the biggest challenges that you're facing with MTI to get it to where you want to see it?
Well, it's taking me a lot. It's taking a lot longer to get these things set up than I was expecting, and but the aim now is to be ready in September for the research. And I know Joseph has spoken with some people, and September the 5th event we're working with CUA, and hopefully get graduate students come and get them interested. So we want to be ready for some people to come already. But Joseph was one of the first ones, but hopefully more will come. So how it works, that's also, we trust in divine providence. So how God will lead this. We're in the end, that's, we're just instruments. And our mother like to say, let God use you without permission. So, you have a certain idea, and how it will work out. Well, probably different, but that's usually happens.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I think that, goes a long way to explain what MTI is, what you're doing, and the value that that's really going to have. Is there anything else that you really want people to remember about MTI? If there's one thing that they take, what do you want to emphasize?
Okay. Well, I think, really to get to know Mother more, to know Mother Teresa more. And, as I say, the authentic mother. The one biographer, a bishop of Saint Therese, made the point: saints do not need embellishment. She wasn't perfect. No saint is perfect. Only Our Lady is perfect. And so the mother as she was, she could get angry sometimes, get impatient sometimes, but she was a strong Albanian character. And one of the reasons that she had to go through that really serious purification was that because she was so strong. I mean, humanly speaking, she wasn't, I don't know if you say wimps for women, but she was a strong, very strong personality. But in order for God to use her so well and fully, she had to go through to use an old image, the wringer, old washing machines. So she had to go through that. And then she was a really very, what would say, supple instrument. And so, yeah, yeah, to get to know the real mother, because that's who she really was, and that's the best. You don't have to, one of the criticisms before was these plastic saints, before Vatican II, and then. Then they kind of rejected all that stuff, and then after the saints made a comeback, but more realistic. We have okay, they were like us. They're not like on the pedestal and say all these. Okay, there's some saints you can just admire because there's no way that you would be able to imitate, but most are, and Mother Teresa is, one of the admirable, but also in many ways to be able to imitate. And I mean. Mother Teresa's successor, Sister Nirmala, was wise enough, and she never tried to be Mother Teresa too. Okay, so there'll never be Mother Teresa as Mother Teresa. Yeah. But I mean, Mother Teresa wanted to give martyrs to the church, and after she died, 98, we had 4, and then recently named again 3. So, really just the real Mother Teresa is what we want to present, because that's who she was, and that's all we need to do. We don't need to make a plastic Mother Teresa. They exist, but there's little statues. But that's all we're into.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's why having conversations like this is going to be so important and valuable in introducing that real human side to people who knew Mother Teresa, and preserving that for the future.
Yeah, that's a good point. She was very human and very, I'm going to say supernatural, but at the same time, so very observant. You couldn't get something past her, and a tremendous memory until about more than 2,000 sisters. She knew each one by their names. She could remember, and she would rattle off all the places they were. Okay, we're in that city, I mean, it was quite something. So, and that was part of showing love too, but those little things. So, I mean, so she was, sometimes I think, if I heard some of those things, I'd say, well, maybe they're kind of maybe exaggerating, but I mean, she was extraordinary, really extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary in ordinariness, but also some things were extraordinary, and those things we don't even try to imitate. So they're admirable and imitable.
That's perfect. And thank you for sharing that experience with us, and, introducing that side to everyone who's going to want to learn more.
Right. She liked chocolate and ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had the custom because her father was a businessman. And so whenever he traveled, he'd bring back something for the children. And so Mother Teresa started that custom too. So when she would be visiting a house, usually she would give chocolates. And then sometimes, instead of eating them, we'd say, okay, we're going to save this box of chocolates because we'll have to give a box of chocolates to another community. So the joke is that after a couple of years, that same box of chocolate will come back to you as it went around from house to house as a gift. So, but she liked chocolate. And one time we were, when we were in New York, we went to the convent on 145th Street, and to pick her up, she was going to spend some hours with us, and so in the van. And so she gave us some, I guess it must have been chocolates. And Mother says, okay, this is from the sisters. And then Father Joseph, our co-founder, said, from the sister, was that you, Mother? And of course, she's not going to lie. So she had to admit that it was actually her thoughtfulness, but it was broadly speaking from the sisters. But it wasn't her chocolate, it was the sisters' chocolates. But it was her idea to give them, make sure she had some. And that's another, sometimes they would ask, okay, how was your experience of Mother Teresa? And I would say, very motherly. And, and then I give some examples of these simple things. I think it was like NBC or at that time of the Beatification. I was doing an interview and I was saying this. And then the interviewer, the man says, well, we have this idea Mother Teresa is a great figure and this and this. And then you're telling us, how ordinary she was. But that's true. She was. I mean, you put it all together, it's extraordinary. Like Jan Petrie, who made the how did she do it, those kind of things. So many topics. I lost you. I don't hear you.
Sorry, I lost you for a second there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Good.
But fantastic. I think this is going to be a really good, I hope people will watch this and be able to feel that more closer understanding to Mother Teresa and really see what MTI is bringing to that conversation. So thank you so much for your time. I know you have the whole day ahead of you in Tijuana.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll talk soon. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you.
Enjoy your day.
You too.